I knew something was wrong the moment my key refused to turn. It was just past 6, the sky still pale with leftover daylight, my work tote digging into my shoulder. I remember noticing the loose thread on my navy silk blouse, thinking I'd trim it once I got inside. I'd had a long day, back-to-back meetings, a skipped lunch, too much coffee, and all I wanted was the quiet of my living room. I tried the key again. Slower this time. Firmer. Nothing. That's when the sound hit me, not from inside the house, but from my phone. A vibration. Then another. My sister's name lit up the screen, bold and unapologetic, like she had every right to be there. "We need to talk." I changed the locks. For a second, the street felt unreal. Too quiet. Too exposed. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and tight, and the distant hum of a lawnmower 2 houses down. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, professional, composed, lipstick still intact, yet something inside me cracked. Changed the locks. While I was at work, my hands shook as I rested my palm against the door I paid for, the door I had opened 1,000 times without thinking. A neighbor across the street slowed his steps, curiosity flickering across his face. I straightened my spine out of instinct. Pride is a strange thing. It shows up even when your heart is breaking. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, a calm settled over me, sharp and unfamiliar. Because in that moment, standing on my own porch like a stranger, I realized something my sister hadn't counted on. She thought this was the end of my story. It wasn't. My sister hadn't always been so bold about taking what she thought belonged to her. At first, it came wrapped in concern, in family language that made refusal feel cruel. "You can stay here," she'd said years ago, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "It'll be easier for both of us." I believed her. I was younger then, still trying to prove I could stand on my own after our parents passed. The house was in my name, yes, but grief has a way of blurring paperwork and boundaries. She moved in slowly. A suitcase. A dresser. Then opinions. Then decisions. I remember the first real fight like it's etched into my bones. We were standing in the kitchen, late evening light slanting through the blinds. I'd just come home from work, exhausted, when she told me that she'd invited someone over to stay indefinitely. No discussion. No asking. "This is my house too," she snapped when I protested. My throat tightened. I felt that familiar lump rise, the one that came whenever I realized my voice didn't matter to her. My hands trembled as I set my bag down, fingers cold despite the summer heat. "It's not," I said quietly. "Legally, it's mine." She laughed. Actually laughed. Dismissive. Sharp. "You wouldn't even know how to handle it without me." That was the moment something shifted. The way she looked at me, not like a sister, but like an inconvenience, burned deeper than the words themselves. I felt small, foolish for ever confusing love with loyalty. Later that night, alone in my room, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser. Inside was a worn envelope, edges soft from being handled too many times. My grandmother had given it to me years before she passed. "Never give away your name," she told me, pressing it into my hands. "People will try to take what's tied to it." Inside were copies of documents. Old, official, stamped and signed. Deeds. Records. Proof I hadn't understood back then, but felt heavy with meaning now. I sat on the edge of the bed, tears finally spilling, not from weakness, but from clarity. I wiped my face, breathing through the ache in my chest. If my sister thought I was powerless, it was because I'd let her believe it. That night, I made a decision. I would stop shrinking. I would learn exactly what belonged to me and how to protect it, even if it meant standing alone. I didn't confront my sister after that night. I didn't wave documents in her face or demand respect. I did something quieter and far more effective. I started preparing. Every morning, I left the house early, heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor so I wouldn't wake her. By day, I worked my job like nothing was wrong, smiling through meetings, nodding at deadlines. By night, I learned. I read. I asked questions I'd never thought to ask before. I met Linda during one of those nights. She was a senior paralegal at a small legal firm I'd started consulting after work, a woman with silver hair pulled into a low bun and eyes that missed nothing. She noticed the way I hovered at the door one evening, unsure, clutching a notebook like a lifeline.
"Sit," she said gently.
"You look like someone who's been carrying too much alone." I told her pieces of the truth, not the drama, not the betrayal, just the facts. Ownership, residency, control. She listened without interrupting, then slid a folder across the desk.
"Know this," she said.
Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means timing. The months that followed were brutal in ways no one saw. Long nights spent cross-referencing paperwork. Early mornings fueled by burnt coffee and stubborn resolve. I learned the difference between possession and ownership, between family pressure and legal reality. There were moments I nearly gave up. Times I sat in my car after work, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, wondering why standing up for myself felt so much harder than being walked over. I noticed ridiculous details in those moments, the crack in my phone screen, the chipped polish on my thumbnail, things that made the world feel unbearably small. Then came the small wins. A confirmation email. A certified copy. A quiet meeting where someone finally said, "You're protected." I kept all of it to myself. No social media updates. No hints at dinner. When my sister asked vague questions, I answered vaguely back. Modesty became my shield. Secrecy my strategy. At home, she continued acting like the house revolved around her. Rearranging furniture. Making plans without me. Testing boundaries she thought didn't exist. But they did. And I was building them brick by brick, invisible but unbreakable. By the time she decided to change the locks, she believed I was still the woman who swallowed her words and stepped aside. She had no idea how much I'd grown in the quiet. I didn't argue with her message. I didn't knock on the door or demand answers through the glass. I stepped off the porch slowly, my heels touching the concrete like I needed the ground to remind me I was real. My sister opened the door a few seconds later anyway. She stood there with her arms crossed, hair perfectly done, wearing that familiar look of certainty, the kind that comes from believing you've already won. Behind her, the hallway light glowed warm and yellow, like the house was welcoming her and rejecting me at the same time. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. "This isn't healthy." I almost smiled at the irony. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. One call. That was all. Her eyebrows knit together. "Who are you calling?" "The right person," I said. The wait felt longer than it probably was. Neighbors drifted closer under the excuse of watering plants or walking dogs. I felt their eyes on me, felt the old instinct to explain myself, to shrink. But I didn't. I stood still, shoulders back, hands steady. When the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, red and blue lights washing over the front of the house, my sister's confidence finally wavered. The deputy stepped out calmly, hand resting near his belt, eyes assessing the scene without judgment. "Evening," he said. "We got a call about an illegal lockout." My sister laughed nervously. "This is a family misunderstanding." She moved out. The sheriff turned to me. "Is that true, ma'am?" I met his gaze.
"No."
I was at work. He nodded once. "Do you have proof of residence or ownership?" I did more than that. From my bag, I pulled the folder I'd kept untouched for months, the one I'd hoped I'd never need but prepared anyway. My name was printed clearly across the top of every page.
The deed.
The records. The law, quiet and undeniable. The sheriff flipped through the papers slowly. The night air felt thick, like the whole street was holding its breath. Then he looked at my sister. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you don't have the authority to change the locks on this property." Her face drained of color. "That's not. She doesn't even handle things. I've been living here." "Living somewhere doesn't make you the owner," he replied. "Please step aside." The sound of the locksmith's van pulling up felt surreal, like a scene from someone else's life. Metal clinked. Tools rattled. The lock that had shut me out was removed in minutes. When the door finally opened, The click echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. I walked past my sister without touching her, without meeting her eyes. The house smelled the same, clean, familiar mine. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with relief so sharp it almost hurt. The sheriff turned to her. "If you don't have permission to be here, you'll need to make arrangements to leave." She stared at me, waiting for something. Permission.
Mercy. Control.
I didn't give her any of it. "I'm not asking you to leave tonight," I said quietly. "But this stops now." She had nothing to say. As the sheriff finished his report and the lights disappeared down the street, the crowd slowly dispersed. The porch was quiet again. Normal. I locked the door behind me, my lock, my key, and leaned against it, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. She had tried to erase me with a lock. Instead, she'd exposed exactly who held the power all along. The house felt different once the door closed behind us. Not because the furniture had changed or because the walls had heard too much. It felt different because I was standing in it without apologizing for taking up space. I set my bag down on the entry table, the same table my sister once tried to move without asking, and slowly slipped off my heels. My feet touched the floor, like I was claiming the ground itself. She hovered near the kitchen, arms tight against her body now, confidence replaced by something brittle. "You embarrass me," she said finally, her voice low. "You didn't have to call the sheriff." I turned to face her. Really face her. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to soften my expression. "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "You put me out of my own home." Silence stretched between us. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the faint ticking of the clock above the sink. Ordinary sounds, grounding and steady, nothing like the chaos she'd tried to create. "This house is mine," I continued, keeping my voice calm. "Legally. Clearly. And from this moment forward, there are rules." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "First," I said, holding up a finger, "no decisions about this house without me. No guests, no changes, no assumptions." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable. "Second," I added, "you don't speak to me like I'm incapable or indebted to you. We are adults. Equals. If that's not possible, distance will be." Her eyes flickered, with something close to fear. "And third," I said, softer now but no less firm, "this situation does not repeat itself. Ever. Because next time, I won't be as generous." She scoffed, trying to recover. "So, what, you're just going to throw me out?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "No," I said. "I'm giving you time, but not control." That landed. I explained what would happen next, timelines, expectations, boundaries. Not as a threat, not as revenge, but as structure. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. She listened, arms loosening, shoulders slumping as the reality set in. The dynamic she'd relied on, my silence, my patience, my reluctance to push back, was gone. "I helped you," she muttered. "I was there when you needed someone. And I appreciate that," I said. "But help doesn't come with ownership. Love doesn't come with locks." Her eyes dropped to the floor. I realized then that this wasn't about winning. It was about ending something unhealthy before it took more from me than it already had. I could feel compassion stirring, but it no longer overpowered my self-respect. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I told her. "But I am changing how you're allowed into it." She nodded once, stiffly. That night, after she went to her room, I walked through the house alone. I touched the back of the couch, the edge of the counter, the door frame near my bedroom. Small gestures, but grounding. This space had seen my grief, my exhaustion, my growth. In the quiet, I thought of my grandmother's words, echoing from years ago. "Never give away your name." I hadn't. And now, for the first time, everyone else understood that too. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful at first, just quieter. Conversations were shorter. Doors closed more gently. My sister stopped rearranging things, stopped speaking for both of us. She moved through the house like someone learning the shape of a place they'd taken for granted. I noticed the changes in small ways. She asked before using my car. She cleaned up after herself. She started coming home earlier, tired in a way that suggested effort instead of entitlement. Whether it came from guilt or fear didn't matter. What mattered was that the balance had shifted. So had I. One evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, watching steam curl into the air. The same table where I'd once felt invisible. My thumbnail polish was still chipped, but this time I smiled at it. It reminded me how far I'd come. Not polished, not perfect, but solid. I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who mistook silence for peace. The one who believed love meant endurance. She had survived by shrinking, by waiting, by hoping things would improve on their own.
They didn't.
I had to improve. My sister eventually moved out. Not in anger. Not dramatically. Just one box at a time, until her presence faded from the corners of the house. We still spoke.
Carefully.
Honestly. With boundaries holding the space where resentment used to live. Some relationships don't end. They transform. Others teach you when to let go. Late one night, while organizing my dresser, I found the old envelope again. The one my grandmother gave me. I ran my fingers over the softened edges, her voice clear in my memory. Never give away your name. I finally understood what she meant. Your name isn't just what's printed on paper. It's your voice, your choices, your right to take up space without permission. Standing in my bedroom, surrounded by the quiet I'd earned, I realized something powerful. My sister had changed the locks to take control. The sheriff had changed them back to restore the law. But I was the one who made sure no one ever held the keys to my life again.